Do you ever think to yourself, God, I wish I could just go back 10 years with everything I know now and just absolutely crush it in business? Like, not learn everything the hard way, pick up on all of those red flags, or deal with shit sooner, or take those opportunities earlier, start building a brand then rather than now. I feel like I do this all the time. I think about all of those hard won lessons. I think about all the things I learned the expensive way. And I can see it so clearly. If I'd have just known this back then, I would have clocked that problem earlier. I would have avoided that mess entirely, or I would have taken that opportunity I was a bit too cautious to touch. I think about like all the staff that walked out, or the problems I lost sleep over that never actually mattered, or the systems I put in place just way too late, or the work I didn't prioritize, or the work that I wasted so much time on that meant nothing. And I'm not normally someone who lives in the past, mostly because, quite frankly, your girl is busy. But if I could go back just even 5 years, this is the advice I'd give myself. You are listening to The Virtual CEO. I'm Amy Wallin, CEO of Link VA, and this is maybe 1 year's worth of business advice in 15 minutes. So let's get into it. So the first thing any business coach worth their salt should tell you is this: track your numbers, revenue, margins, leads, conversions, expenses. And it's not just your finances. I mean, the operating numbers of your business. Your numbers will tell you about the problems and opportunities long before your bank balance ever does. And they will give you more direction and clarity than any story that someone is telling you, or more importantly, any story that you're telling yourself. Let me be very clear. I spoke to a guy today who was interested in getting on a social media assistant. And I said to him, I'm like, well, what is it that you're wanting to achieve? And he said, well, I just want someone to do marketing. And without yelling at him, because I am super patient and considerate, I questioned him further, and I was, just to be able to narrow it down. And he was like, oh, well, I mean, like more visits to the website. And I was like, great. How many visits are you getting now? And he said, well, I don't know. I was like, okay, well, how many inquiries are coming through the website? And again, he was like, well, I don't know. So I was like, so how will you know if your VA is doing a good job? And he's like, well, I just want someone to do marketing. And what I didn't shout at him afterwards, again, because of the patient thing, is that marketing isn't some magic spell that you throw into the sky and hope something happens, right? You don't just get to paint a rainbow, say marketing, and expect that your business is going to improve. Everything is numbers, everything. The number of people in your CRM, the number of emails that you send out, your open rates, your website traffic, your leads, your bookings, your conversion rates, your average sale, your average dollar sale, the cost of acquisition, right? And this guy didn't have a single number. Times that across every department in your business: finance, HR, sales, your retention, whatever. If you don't know where you are, you can't decide where you're going. And if you don't track what happens between these 2 points, you're not managing a business. You're just doing activities and you're hoping for the best. But instead of, tracking the information, you're just burying yourself in the busy work and the vague ideas like marketing because, numbers feel boring or it's not your thing, right? And this is exactly why you stay stuck, hopping on calls and asking for marketing while nothing changes. And if you don't know how many leads you have, or how many bookings, or how many sales, or what your expenses are, or what your profit is, this is what it means to not be in business, right? That's the difference between being an employee doing tasks and being a CEO managing an actual business. Sorry if you're getting a bit heated. This one makes me furious. That's why it's first, so we can get it out of the way. And I promise I'll get like 5% nicer after this, maybe 2%. Anyway, the second thing a business coach should tell you when you start to grow a team, or even just when you start to get clients in, is you get what you tolerate. And obviously, I learned this in an annoying way. Early on, I had someone in my team who was fine, right? Not terrible, not great, just fine. They missed deadlines occasionally. The work was a little bit sloppy. The communication wasn't amazing. It was nothing catastrophic. And so I just kept letting it slide. And every time something wasn't quite right, I just tell myself a bit of a story. I'm like, oh, they're still learning, or they didn't mean it, or they're busy, or I'll deal with it later. And because it was easier in the moment, I'd either fix it myself or I'd quietly just adjust around them instead of addressing it directly. And what I didn't realize at the time was that I was the one who was setting the standard. And it wasn't with, some policy or a values document. It was with my behavior. And because once you let something slide at once, it's not a mistake anymore. Now that's the baseline. Deadlines start slipping more often. The quality didn't improve. It just kind of slowly got worse. And what pissed me off is that I felt resentful, even though I was the one who kept letting it happen. And the worst part, though, and other people saw it, right? And when one person gets away with something, it quietly becomes permission for literally everyone else. Standards don't stay isolated, they spread. The moment I stopped tolerating it and actually addressed things in real time and clearly and without softening it or over-explaining it, everything changed. And it wasn't just with that one person, but it was across the entire team. Work got cleaner. Deadlines started being taken more seriously. And I stopped feeling like I was carrying the business on my back. Standards are not what you say you want, although, by the way, you still do need to say them. They are what you consistently enforce. If you tolerate late work, you get late work. If you tolerate half effort, you get half effort. If you tolerate excuses, you get excuses. And if that is happening in your business, it's not a mystery, it's feedback. It's not about being harsher. You just need to be clearer and you need to be quicker. Because every single time that you avoid enforcing a standard, you're not being kind, you're just delaying a bigger problem. Next piece of advice that goes kind of hand in hand with that one is that, managing relationships is required no matter what kind of business you're in. I've looked into it, unfortunately. So the third thing that you will get from your coach is this: state your expectations like there is absolutely no common knowledge, right? Because there isn't. And this one shows up everywhere for me, right? It shows up in staff management. It shows up in client relationships. Honestly, this has saved me in my normal friendships and relationships too. People are not mind readers. And you are a fucking child if you get passive aggressive or resentful or moody because someone didn't meet an expectation that you never clearly stated. And I see this constantly, right? Someone is upset at work because a staff member didn't do what they wanted, or a client is annoyed because something didn't go the way they expected, or, a founder is furious because people just don't get it, right? And every single time, and I mean every single time, when you peel it back, the same two things are missing. The expectation was never clear, and the feedback or the accountability was never given. Instead, people hope that the other person just gets the message, and they won't. They never do. That is not how humans work. Do you know how much time and stress and money is wasted because people won't just say what they want? Be explicit. Be painfully explicit. What does good look like? When is it due? How should this be communicated? What happens if it's missed? I don't know what the information is for you. And then, this part matters, pull people up when they don't hit it, as I said earlier. This sounds simple, and you know what? It is simple. And I would bet money that you are in a business right now where this isn't being done properly, which is why things always feel harder than they need to be. So just say what you expect. Correct it when it's missed. Stop hoping that people read your mind. And that alone will change your business more than most strategies ever will. Fourth piece of advice that you would get from a business coach is results come from boring work, right? And I hate that this is true. Truly, I wish there was a cooler answer. Early on, I thought it came from big ideas and new strategies and rebrands and pivots and fresh starts. And this exciting stuff, it feels like momentum. It always feels like it's productive. It gives you a bit of a hit. You feel clever. You feel like you're doing business. None of that is actually what moves the needle, right? What moved the needle was the boring shit that I wanted to skip. It was, following people up when I didn't feel like it. It was posting consistently even when the content wasn't amazing. It was having the same conversation again. It was checking the same freaking numbers every week. It was fixing the small issue instead of chasing something new. And that stuff, the stuff that works is rarely impressive, right? It's repetitive, it's unsexy, it doesn't give you that instant validation. It's me looking at the numbers every week and analyzing how I can make this thing 1% more efficient, or get 1% more reach, or get 1% better at converting. Right? And I've watched people sabotage themselves over and over because they confuse boredom with stagnation. They'll do something once, maybe twice, not see an immediate result and decide that it doesn't work. People don't want to improve. They just want to hit the jackpot, right? They want the magic pill. They want the elixir, and it doesn't exist. And meanwhile, the people who quietly win or loudly win are doing the same thing on repeat, same offer, same message, same process, same follow-up over and over again, long after everyone else has gotten bored and moved along. Because that's where most people tap out, because they need novelty to stay engaged. But business doesn't reward novelty. They reward consistency. And every time I'd stuck with the boring work longer than I wanted to, obviously, but results followed. And it wasn't instant, but it was predictable. And every time I chased excitement instead of the boring work, I reset my own progress and had to start again. So if you're not getting results right now, I bet money it's not because you need something new. It's because you're not doing the boring thing long enough for it to compound. The unglamorous work is the work. And the sooner that you stop trying to make it exciting, the faster it's actually going to pay off. Fifth thing, and I will say that only 1% of decent coaches will tell you this. Don't forget to be happy. And I know that sounds wildly out of character for everything I've said so far and for me in general. But if you haven't figured it out by now, business is stressful. It's uncomfortable. And if you are not careful, you start believing that it has to be that way. When you are building something or running a high pressure career, it's so easy to get fixated on achievement, on growth, on the next milestone, on more, right? And somewhere along the way, we convince ourselves that the thing that will make us happy is more success. It's more power. It's more recognition. It's more money. And it isn't. It just isn't those things. What actually happens is that we forget what makes us happy in the first place, because we will just gaslight ourselves into thinking that happiness comes after success, right? And then years later, we resent the business that we've poured our time, our energy, and our life into because we're miserable. Don't worry, I've got a little dumb story about this as well. Don't you stress out. When I was in my early 20s, I desperately wanted a pet, right? I wanted a dog or a cat. I'm an animal person. But I lived in an apartment and I moved around a lot, and it didn't feel practical. And I told myself, right now you don't need another responsibility. You need to focus on your career. I didn't have time to look after something else. And then completely by chance, I came across this letter online written by a woman who was dying of cancer in her late 20s. And it completely shifted my worldview. The letter, it was devastating, as you would expect. But there was this one paragraph that just, it punched me straight in the chest. She wrote about how sad she was to leave her dog behind and how she wished that she had more years with him. And I remember thinking to myself, this is what people think about at the end. In this entire letter, she didn't mention money once. She didn't mention career success. She didn't mention any of her achievements. It all boiled down to how well she loved. And that's what mattered when everything else fell away. And then I was sitting there denying myself something so achievable, so simple for the sake of convenience, right? And so I went and I rescued a cat the next fucking week. And that little goblin has brought me more joy and more companionship than literally anything else in my life. He was worth every single bit of frustration, every inconvenience, every, ruined piece of furniture because of what he gave me in return. So here's the lesson. Don't deny yourself happiness because it isn't practical, right? I'm not saying go out and do a whole bunch of drugs. I'm just saying don't postpone joy until some imaginary future version of your life exists. Don't treat happiness like it's a reward that you earn later, because we all die at the end of this journey. And you don't know if that journey is ending in 50 years or 5 minutes. And I, for one, don't want my tombstone to say, oh, the most sensible person in the graveyard, right? You can't take money with you. All you have at the end is the love that mattered. And if you forget that, everything else becomes pointless. And that's where I'll leave it. Build the business, chase the goals, do the hard, boring, uncomfortable work, but don't sacrifice your happiness on the altar of career. If you have made it this far and you got some gold, great. Thank God. Please give us a like, share if the mood takes you, and I'll catch you next week.